Welcome to 1010 News. We're back this week with more of your top 10 news in 10 minutes. I'm Andy Hong. As you can tell, the solar storm did not fry all of our electronics last week, although there were beautiful northern lights in the northern United States. So, for better or for worse, here is our first news of the night. Yesterday, Scotland held a historic vote on whether or not to secede from the United Kingdom. In the end, the land of golf and haggis remained in the Union. There was a record voter turnout as almost 90% of the nation's registered voters, some 4.6 million men and women, gathered to decide the nation's future. Although the campaigns were closely matched before the historic vote, only 1.6 million ended up voting in favor of independence. Many English politicians, such as Prime Minister David Cameron, were, needless to say, delighted by the result. However, many believe that the referendum was a sign of a looser union of nations to come for the British Isles. We must not forget that terrorism in general, not just ISIS, is constantly inflicting severe damage to the people and property around the world. Al-Qaeda's new subcontinent branch in India launched an attack on Pakistan's navy to hijack a ship and attack the American Navy with the newly acquired weapons. In Australia, 2 men were arrested and charged for planning an ISIS-style execution in the name of Islam. Meanwhile, in ISIS-afflicted Syria, 15 children died because of poor quality vaccination medication during the civil war. In the continuing American war against terror, the ISIS campaign is proving to be one of the more difficult. The airstrikes have been effective in slowing down the radical Islamist groups advanced into Iraq and Syria, but many doubt that 1,000-pound bombs will be able to push the militants out of Mosul and Fallujah. Therefore, one major agenda on President Obama's plan to defeat ISIS is assisting the moderate Syrian anti-Assad groups. So far, the administration has only approved an aid package to the rebels. The Syrian rebels were disappointed with the lack of military support from the United States, but Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko received some level of comfort. Poroshenko met with Secretary of State John Kerry and President Obama on his latest visit of the United States and came with an appeal for help against the Russian army sitting in eastern Ukraine. The White House responded to the appeals with $46 million in non-lethal aid such as body armor, first aid kits, and vehicles. Although Obama and the administration omitted weapons from the aid package, Poroshenko still, according to CNN, said that he was fully satisfied with the support. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin is continuing to expand his military presence, this time in the Pacific. Russian long-range bombers have dramatically increased flights around Japan, the Korean Peninsula, and Guam. They even made a flight to the coast of California. Although the planes were, according to military laws, strictly in international airspace, American and NATO air units are nonetheless in high alert. Terrorism, military conflicts such as these, along with climate change and AIDS epidemics, have plagued UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon for several years, nearly 7 years now, since he took office, and now the Ebola outbreak in Western Africa is also becoming an increasingly urgent threat. For the Secretary General, however, the disease that has now killed 2,600 people is an opportunity to either redeem himself and show the world he's capable of bringing the international community together to solve a problem, or shame himself and lead to the destruction of his career. Happy thoughts. Yesterday, the Security Council declared Ebola a global threat, and Ban immediately expressed his desire of sending an emergency mission to stop the disease. Of course, I hope that Mr. Ban does succeed in stopping the deadly virus from spreading any further. Back in the United States, in Pennsylvania, a heavily armed police killer named Eric Matthew Frayne is on the loose, and the FBI put him on the top 10 wanted list with a $100,000 reward for any leads. Frayne is a trained survivalist and is in possession of military-grade assault rifles, and apparently was always fond of guns and had strong feelings against the government. Yesterday, hundreds attended the funeral of late Corporal Brian Dickinson, who was among the officers killed by Frayne. The case is very reminiscent of the Christopher Dorner incident in Southern California last year and serves as a reminder of our obligation as a society to limit, at the very least, the use of heavy-duty assault rifles by civilians. The National Football League has been under intense fire for weeks for its deplorable handling of domestic violence committed by the athletes. Now, several major corporate sponsors are casting doubts over, according to a statement by PepsiCo, the integrity of the league. Among the sponsors pressuring the NFL to take more decisive action in dealing with violence by athletes are McDonald's, Visa, Campbell Soup, and Anheuser-Busch. However, the $10 billion industry is still yet to show any real plan to fix the issues in the league. Troubled Toronto Mayor Bob Ford, according to an announcement on Wednesday by a doctor in Mount Sinai Hospital, has cancer and will be undergoing chemotherapy. And twisted poetic justice, Ford had malignant liposarcoma, which is an aggressive tumor resulting from fat tissue. Fortunately, however, doctors are optimistic about the tumor. He was stripped of all powers after he was caught committing illegal activities such as smoking crack cocaine, then severely abusing his mayoral powers to keep himself in power. The internet is now also considered a completely public space full of not only ordinary people but also conmen and police. However, the new iOS 8, soon to be released by Apple, will offer complete protection against police whether they have a search warrant or not. Think about it. What will be the legal implications of concealing information from police even if they have a warrant? Well, Apple did release something a little less controversial but nevertheless revolutionary, the Apple Pay, which many experts say may be safer than ordinary credit cards. However, Apple still has its many faults in security, including the leak of nude photos of celebrities through iCloud a few weeks ago. For me, as long as the new iOS doesn't turn my iPad 1, which is running the teleprompter right now, into a piece of worthlessness, I'm fine. And if you have ever watched The Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter, you may have considered, at least a little bit, you have to admit it, the possible implications of having an invisibility cloak. On Sunday, the two scientists released a study on Nature Materials on arranging extremely small blocks to bend and focus light to essentially create a functional invisibility cloak. According to Science News, the construction of metamaterials is in a new phase of its development. We now use quote-unquote intricately engineered combinations of metal, plastic, and other components with structural features small enough to manipulate waves of light. If you have any idea of what you would do with an invisibility cloak, leave it in the comments below. And in 1796, today, George Washington delivered his farewell address in which he warned the United States against party politics and meddling in international affairs. Today, America is sharply divided between two unyielding political parties and is an economic and political global leader in several international organizations. On this 218th anniversary, I started speaking Scottish for a little there. I think it's necessary to reflect on the decisions of this nation and look to the future with Washington's warnings in mind. I'm not sure if international pluralism can be avoided in this global world, but anybody can tell you that Washington was right about how party politics suck. Well, that was 1010 News for tonight. I'm Andy Hong. Pardon the cliche, but like us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We'll be back next week with more of your top 10 news in 10 minutes.